Worship. It's an old word, going back to Old English, albeit with a different spelling and pronunciation. Roughly translated, it meant an acknowledgement of worth, the act of acknowledging the worth of something. In a religious context, the rites or rituals for acknowledging the divine, the worthiness, the value, the magnitude of that which is greater than ourselves, yet for Hindus, which we are all also part of. Worship developed into a word that has close associations with Christian doctrine, of separation, of in some definitions of turning off critical faculties, and of perhaps infallibility. All things which don't fully fit with a broadly Hindu perspective. Here's HAF's Dr. Vijay Satnarayan.
The word worship, it has a very lovely etymological derivation. You can go back to, Middle English. You could go back to West Saxon, for example, and see that it does have a little bit more of a broad set of semantic range. It does talk about the condition of being worthy, of distinction, of glory. And so it has a relationship with the word worth itself. But in the 1300s and later, it shifts from a very generalized set of meanings to a very specific meaning. And it means the worship of the one true God as more and more of Europe is Christianized. What we're left with is, if you're not worshiping the one true God, who are you worshiping? You have two choices when it comes to Western or even Middle Eastern understandings of ancient India. And that was, you're either worshiping idols or you're worshiping false gods, plural. So when we look at what they're telling us, the word worship is inherently tied with either worshiping the one true God as they see it, or worshiping error, something that is completely wrong, and so wrong that it sends you to damnation. So I looked at the word again, and I looked to see whether the word puja or archana, which is the general Sanskrit two words that are used in and translated by the word worship in English. And when I looked at those two words, they have a very similar set of semantic range, and they both mean to honor, to revere, to regard, also to present with, to give gifts to, and also, of course, to initiate, to consecrate, or we might say to bless, example, if we're using ecclesiastical language again. So it doesn't match, because we have Gau Puja, we have Vahana Puja, we have Deva Puja. We do have, in our monotheist traditions, veneration of the Supreme Being, Deva Puja. But we also have that word coming up again with Gau Puja, puja of a cow. We have it with Vahana Puja, puja of a vehicle. You could have, X number of things, Vriksh Puja, Tulasi Puja, worship of a tree, worship of the Tulasi. And it just doesn't translate right. It doesn't sit right, because translation is not just about a literal translation. If the word doesn't translate the category, the actual phenomenon correctly, then it can't be said to be a good translation. So what we are trying to translate is puja being veneration, respect, honoring, even thanksgiving, in most cases. And then when you're doing things like, your accounts puja, you're doing the blessing or the consecration of those accounts. You're hoping that everything goes well. So worship doesn't work in this regard. And moreover, it puts us in the mindset of right and wrong. And especially when it comes to the dharma tradition, if there is logic and reason behind what you're doing, and it's shown not to be harming to anybody else or even to yourself, then that type of puja is not wrong or right. It's what you need. It's what is good for you. It's what's good for your tradition. And we have no place in judging whether it's right or wrong. That's not what the dharmas teach us. So in stepping away from worship and taking back the word with its original kind of sense in English of puja referring to veneration, we're actually stepping outside of the mindset of right and wrong. This is right, that is wrong, I am right, you are wrong, getting out of that discussion altogether and stepping into a place where like, oh, is that how you do it? Cool. That kind of respect is what kept the dharmas together in ancient India, and I think that that's part of the need of now.
So maybe worship isn't the best word to use for the myriad practices and methods Hindus use to honor those moments, those relationships, those beings that are worthy of acknowledging as important, as poignant, as great. Worship is a word laden with non-Hindu associations. Venerate is probably better and is an easy swap in language. Nevertheless, how do Hindus in our homes and temples and everyday lives venerate that which is worthy of that honor? I'm Matt McDermott, and this is All About Hinduism. Hindus throughout the millennia have a number of rituals that are used as acts of worship, devotion, honoring, veneration to the one reality that we experience in various manifestations. Some of these rituals are undertaken for specific results, on specific occasions. Some are elaborate, some simple. Some are conducted by individuals trained for the purpose, often whose ancestors and their ancestors were also similarly trained and who have dedicated their lives to practicing and passing down those traditions. Others are conducted by people less formally trained, but who were taught to perform them by family members and also carry on and pass along traditions. Some are conducted in or outside the home, others at temples, grand or humble, or spaces set aside for them. These rituals, which can take on a variety of forms, draw together the senses, centering the attention of the person conducting the ritual, focus on the chosen form of the divine being invoked and honored. This is puja. Puja, a Sanskrit word, thus is a technique for fostering spiritual growth through action, devotion, focus and introspection, and knowledge. This is an especially useful way of connecting with and honoring the divine, as it combines physical, verbal, mental, and vibrational aspects of worship. Each of those are also methods of yoga, though that's a topic for another time. In most puja, a murti, that is a physical representation of a deva or devi, or sometimes a photo or engraving of the deity, serves as an embodiment of the divine, invoking that form and its attributes in the mind of the devotee performing the ritual and those other people in attendance. This murti or image is an aid, a sacred medium for worship. The murti or image serves as a tool for contemplating the nature of the divine. It is not considered, as is often wrongly thought by people not familiar with the Hindu dharma traditions or related traditions, to actually be a god itself. It is not an idol in the Abrahamic graven image concept. Murti are also considered to house the power, the energy of the divine, which is infused, drawn into the murti during a specific ceremony called prana pratishta. In a puja, be it at a temple or in the home, the deity is treated as an honored guest, welcomed with hospitality, served with love, and finally, courteously sent back to their abode, seeking their blessings throughout the process. When it comes to puja conducted at the home, a 16-step puja is a traditional form. Despite the multiple steps, it can be conducted in a relatively short amount of time, and when done on a daily basis, in a spiritual practice, cultivating both devotion and discipline, building a personal connection to a person's favorite form of the divine. When this becomes an established practice, it helps a person work towards seeking the divine in all things and all beings around them. During such a puja, following some introductory steps, recitation of mantras, and setting the intention for the ritual, the murti is offered water, as a guest might be given who has just arrived after a long journey. Then refreshment is symbolically given in the form of honey, sugar, ghee, or yogurt. More water is offered, and then fresh clothing and decorations. Sandalwood paste, vermilion, turmeric, or sacred ash are offered. Flowers are given, and incense, things that are beautiful and good smelling. A lamp is lit and offered. Food arrives and is given. More water, and betel nut and leaves to freshen the mouth. Finally, the divine form is walked around, or the devotee stands in place and turns around 3 times clockwise, both symbolizing that the divine is the center of their life. As one final thing, the devotee bows down in gratitude, asks forgiveness for any mistakes made during the puja. For those unfamiliar, it all may seem like a lot to do and a lot to remember, but it all makes sense and is straightforward when you understand that it is all being done to welcome into the place of puja and into the heart of those present the divine principle, the energy, and being of the form of the divine being worshipped. In a temple, though it can seem more complex, and in honesty at the largest ones in India, which can seem like towns unto themselves, it can feel overwhelming the first time you visit, the same principles and practices are at work. For thousands of years, Hindus have constructed temples, allowing people to immerse themselves in an atmosphere where they can worship, gather with other devotees, and become more connected to the divine. Each one is a sacred space. Before entering a temple, it is recommended to be clean and appropriately dressed. For both men and women, this generally means not wearing shorts and keeping the shoulders covered. Some temples in India have specific dress codes, which are often posted prominently, that may include not wearing jeans, considered casual or working clothing, or only wearing traditional Indian clothing in its various forms, or sometimes for men entering shirtless and wearing unsewn cloth draped around the lower part of the body. In the US, many temples are far less specific in required dress, though being clean and reasonably well put together regardless of the style of clothing is considered good manners. All of this is done because in entering a temple, you are entering the home of a deity, or as is often the case, multiple deities. When you enter, you are a guest in that home, and you want to present yourself well. In all temples, you need to remove your shoes. Sometimes this is entirely outside the temple complex, before you even enter the main door or gate. Other times, it is at a designated space inside the complex or building, but before entering the temple proper. If it is not obvious where to do so, racks for shoes, informational signs, or someone telling you where to go, just ask where to leave your shoes, or follow in the crowd of people who still have their shoes on. They are likely going to take them off. Removing your shoes is both a courtesy and a practical matter, as it leaves the outside world, both mentally and physically, behind. Depending on the size of the temple and the number of deities present there may be a traditional order in which they are visited before the main deity is sought out. Bowing down as a gesture of humility comes next. How this is done varies for men and women and by regional custom and tradition. For those that are physically able, going to your knees and touching your head to the ground is most common. Sometimes people, particularly men, will briefly but fully prostrate themselves on the ground, hands outstretched overhead, palms together. As when visiting a friend's home for dinner, and you may bring a small gift or contribution to the meal you're going to have, it is common for Hindus to bring flowers or fruit as an offering for the deities they are visiting. This is not required, though doing so is an act of service that can deepen one's sincere devotion. In the room or space housing the murti, the specific pujas offered vary from place to place and occur on a specific schedule. Often this schedule is posted somewhere in the temple or on the website for a temple, though generally you can also visit outside of specific puja times as well. These puja vary in detail and level of elaborateness, but roughly follow the steps for home worship. In some places, dancers may perform as part of the offering. In others, a fire ceremony may take place. Traditional music, or solo or group singing may take place. Afterwards, some of the offerings are distributed around as a blessed gift called prasadam. With a small few regional exceptions in the diaspora, Hindu temple worship is not congregational in nature. Even though many people may be coming together at the same time to witness a puja, there are no sermons or talks by a priest to those people attending the service, as you find in other religious traditions. Such talks by learned spiritual teachers do have a strong place within the Hindu tradition. Learning from swamis and gurus is held as being centrally important to spiritual growth. And such talks do sometimes take place on temple grounds, especially if an important swami happens to be visiting a temple, but they are not part of the puja itself. Rather, public temple worship is about being in association with the divine in a sacred place set aside for this purpose. You are seeing the deity and in turn being seen by the divine. This reciprocated viewing is known as darshan. You will hear devotees saying they're going to a temple to have darshan, or I had darshan of Lord Shiva. Or there will be a sign indicating where to line up for darshan, and in larger temples for those people who have paid to not have to wait in a longer line, a line for special darshan. Darshan means having a glimpse or view, literally, and it is used to refer both to seeing and being seen by the deity in a temple context, and also seeing and being seen by spiritual teachers such as gurus, or sometimes by experienced dedicated renunciate monks as well. Satguru Bodhinatha Valan Swami of the Kauai Yadanan describes darshan as an ever-growing spiritual experience in which the sense of separation that we normally experience in the world is transcended. Quote, "There is a oneness between seer and seen," he says. Each is seeing the other and momentarily being the other. When you really take darshan to its depths, you are looking at the deity or guru, you are sensing the oneness, the one being that you both are. Now that is coming from specific Hindu spiritual lineage, and other gurus or scholars may explain the concept of darshan slightly differently, in what it means in terms of relationship between the individual and the divine. But the basic idea of both seeing the icon of the deity and in turn being seen back remains the same. The respect and recognition of worthiness and relationship that underpins puja and temple practices also extends to other aspects of life. A puja can be performed when a new vehicle is purchased, a new home entered, at certain times of the year to the tools with which you do your job. To our animal companions too, at times and special occasions. These are done, at least by most Hindus today, not out of some belief that if a puja isn't performed, your car will break down, your house will be unhealthy, your computer or hammer or what have you will magically work better. Rather, it is a moment to pause and recognize the importance of these things in life, to honor them, to invoke good energy and blessings. Such a mindset of being present and shaping your world through that presence can be brought, with some effort, yes, into all of life. While distinct from actual puja or temple worship or darshan, if we imbue an attitude of service and gratitude and recognition of the divine similarly into, for example, meal preparation and raising our children, our work, when we exercise or spend time in nature, then an additional layer of meaning can be created. We've made it to the end of this episode of All About Hinduism. The script for this episode was created in large part from materials created by Shaw Mallard and other members of the Hindu American Foundation staff. Before you go, do me a favor, leave us a nice 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening to this on. Please also subscribe or follow us so you can get all of the new episodes the moment they're released. And if you found this episode informative, enjoyable, and useful, please share it right now with someone who will feel the same about it. Finally, you can help ensure that more of these get made by making a donation to HAF at hinduamerican.org/donate. Thanks for listening.